Hello, everybody. We are live on GM Philosophy Channel. Me and DM Ramos, aka William. We are here to talk about a couple different things. I see that Garrick's in the chat. Hello, Garrick. Great to see you. It's like old times again. Can you hear me okay, William?
I can.
Okay.
Let me see if I can also see the chat. I guess join chat, I guess maybe. Let me see what happens there. There we go.
Yeah, we seem to be live. Heck yeah. Okay. Up and rolling. Very good. Very good. So yeah, we're going to be talking about a couple different things. So William has written a book, which is a continuation of the Barren Lands campaign with some of the characters. We're going to talk about basically the process of like writing that book. We're going to talk about the book itself. We actually have the first chapter here available for free for anyone who wants to grab it and take a look at it, which might be especially interesting as we get into it and William starts kind of talking about the process of making it. But also, we're going to be talking a little bit about this process of like turning your D&D games, campaigns, stories into novels. William did that with this, but this isn't the first time, really. William has written many books, and I think that there were a good number of them that were at least inspired by or began their life as a TTRPG before that. So I know that a lot of people like this idea of commemorating the game, commemorating the story in a novel format. But I think for a lot of people, this is kind of overwhelming. So we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit too. And I actually have a little bit of, I have some things to say about that too, because I've actually delved into that a few times. I've never published anything like that, but I do have some things I've learned that might be helpful to people who are looking to get into that. So yeah, heck yeah. So for those who are here listening, and for those who will be here, welcome. And we haven't done a live stream in a long, long time. So this is super, super fun. And yeah, so to kick it off, I'm going to put the link to this first chapter. I'm going to actually pin it in the comments. I have to go to YouTube and do this, I believe. Yeah. The first chapter for free. Waz is here. How's it going, Waz? All right, so there's the link to that. I'm going to pin that. Now, the actual release date for this book is September 15th. So if you keep an eye out on the channel here or in the Discord, I'll be posting that on the 15th. We'll post a link to the actual product. But in the meantime, you can read that first chapter. But here's what I would like to get started with. William, I'd like to have you give basically like an overview of what this is. For those of you who've watched this channel very much, you knew that we were running the Barren Lands. This is a 13-session campaign that I ran earlier in the year, and William played Valenthi in the campaign. And so, you've probably at least heard about that. If not, if you go back to my live videos, we have all the sessions online. But William, I would like you to kind of describe like what this is, kind of give an overview of the book, kind of like a back cover overview type, approach to like what it is, what we're talking about here. And then I have a couple of other questions I'd like to get into, but I'm going to leave it to you for now and just talk about it.
Sure. So basically, it's a continuation of what we played in the Tuesday campaign. It actually follows the four characters of Valenthi, Luna, Phaline, and Kerrigan. And as y'all can see in the cover, the other characters who returned, I guess, through, well, supposedly in their minds, returned back home. Who knows where Soul is and whatever happened to Omen. And we know that Hector went west. So we're kind of just focused on those four characters. I wanted to have a continuation because I really loved the campaign and I liked the way the story was progressing. So I figured I would go ahead and push forward with what I thought would happen if they just went ahead and moved forward after we had a battle in Fort Winterford. And the four of them decided to keep together. Valenthi, of course, staying because she started building feelings for Kerrigan, which were hopefully played out in the game that we were having on Tuesdays. And this kind of expands on that and expands into the world of the orcs and the, I guess, emotions and all the tensions and everything else kind of involved as the story arc progresses. And in the end, for what I see in this particular book, all of them coming together closer by the time that the story ends for this story of the novel. So hopefully that gives a kind of good idea what it is.
Yeah.
Which, of course, in the first chapter, I didn't want to put. We were discussing this. I didn't want to put too much backstory. I was trying to start the book as something that is new for readers that didn't know about the stream, didn't ever watch the game, but I still had to try to put some sort of information from where they came from. And hopefully that was, when people read that novel, hopefully that is pushed through in the story.
Very good. Very good. Okay. So with that being said, here's the cover here. I'm sharing it on the screen. This looks really awesome. So the one at the front there is Valenthi. For those of you watching or whatever, the one to the left was an NPC in the game. Her name is Luna, and she's got some interesting things going on. And then the one to the right was Bailey's character, Faylene, an elf, and everyone was from different worlds too. Keep in mind, because that was part of the story. Is the convergence brought these heroes together, sort of seemingly randomly, but it turns out it wasn't completely random, but like from other worlds. And then that character in the background is Kerrigan, a white-skinned orc who they met in the Arctic wasteland of the Barren Lands. And so, and that's the one William was referencing. There was a bit of a love story developing, and I believe it continues in this book. I have not read this whole book. I've read small excerpts of it, but I've not actually got to read the whole thing yet. But okay, so now with this being said, I'd like to talk a little bit about just the process of capturing story. And in this case, maybe it's like a continuation of a story, but still there's a lot of content in this book that was basically built upon storyline that happened in the campaign. So very much so based on the game. And I think there's a lot of people who would like to commemorate, capture, recreate, maybe even sell the story of their campaigns. We all know that we've had those awesome campaigns. It's like if this was just a movie or if this was just a book, but you've actually done this, and this isn't the first time you've done this. So I would like to, if you would, to give a little bit of an explanation to people, like how you start this, what your process looks like, how you make it manageable and like actually achievable instead of being this like overwhelming process. What is your process?
Well, I'll say that the process for this particular one was actually a little bit different compared to my normal process that I use. The first time I think I wrote about 500,000 words of my world when I first started, when I was in my late teens, actually, and working through my early 20s, describing my world of Solar. And really, those were actually based particularly on the notes I took from all the campaigns that me and my buddies played. And I knew that there has to be a little bit of difference, a little bit more, how do you say, not much chaos in the story compared to how the games go. So I had to take that element away. But really, it helped me to create this interesting, unique story because it wasn't all based on my mind. And what I did every single time we did some important action or memorable plot point that happened in the campaign, because it's not going to follow how a story really is, because we got 3-act structure that we have to follow. There's other templates that you can do, but for the most part, the 3-act structure is what's gonna happen. And you have these particular plot points in story in the novel. So when you're playing a campaign, obviously it's not going to follow those. You have your own plot points that you wish your characters would at least hopefully follow into, but sometimes they might not. All you really do, or at least for me, my process is what are the most important plot points that generally cover the idea of that specific phase of my game. And then I just take all the notes I did and start outlining and trying to merge it into the 3-act structure of my novel from there. At least that was my first process that I did when I wrote my story back in the olden days. Though I didn't get to publish that one because I was young. I put everything. That's when we had floppy disks, and we didn't have USBs quite yet, so we had to save everything on a actual disk, floppy disk, or we just had paper. And I decided to put them all together in one duffel bag, and yeah, that duffel bag got stolen with all my story. But that burnt me out for a little while, so I learned a different process of doing story writing, and it came from playing Vampire the Masquerade, if anybody's familiar with that. And most of my 7 novels that I currently have is based off the ideas of the games that I played as Vampire the Masquerade as a player. And similar to what I just explained, there can be so much chaos, and there can always be like different divergence of how an actual, like, because you don't want your games to be linear sometimes, but with novels they have to be linear because you already know which way the story is going. So with Vampire the Masquerade, I didn't quite take notes and create it from a campaign. I created it from the ideas of the campaign, and then that's where I kind of got my idea for the Ravenverse, which is my vampire universe, and started writing stories, which that one has its own wiki that I created and website. So in this particular process, though, it's a little bit different. I got a lot of friends who used to tell me you should just embrace the wave of AI. And I had a lot of, I don't know, biases against AI. And a lot of people used to tell me, you know what, nowadays you can even have AI that you can press a button and it's going to create a story for you. And I was like, really? It's like, that's pretty crazy. And I experimented with it, and I could see where people who probably never wrote novels could see that. But then I started realizing that, no, you can't really just press a button with AI and write a story. Though what it can do is help you do the same thing that I do when I'm trying to figure out how to write descriptions and how to write certain, when I'm out of ideas, I look at like 10 different famous novelists and read their stories. And my process starts by at least writing a thesaurus of descriptions and then trying to figure out which archetype of story I'm going to follow into. And what I did this time around, I decided, okay, let me embrace AI as a test. And I figured I was going to use AI to help me write this novel. And since I already had 7 novels out there, my process for this particular one is I first taught AI how to write like I did, so it can copy my style particularly. And it came pretty darn close. I say about 80% close to my style of writing. There were little things that it repeated and a few aspects that I had to go back and completely tweak out. But it got all the fat of descriptions and all the, I guess, things that had to do with like I don't go into purple prose, but it got all that out of the way, and then I could go in there and tweak it and then change it up to what I wanted it to fit into. But it already had like 80% of my style of writing. And then what I did is pretty much just I'm not in novel writing, there's either the ones that write by the seat of your pants, which that's what I am, and then there's also the ones who create an outline. My process have always been writing by the seat of my pants because I already know the beginning and I already see the ending. In this one, I saw the beginning and the ending, but I actually had to write an outline because I had AI helping me. And I spent quite a bit of money on trying every AI out there that has to deal with writing books. And the best ones that I found were ChatGPT and Claude. And those together, because they can see into the past, into the future, into the middle, is they kept the outline pretty straightforward and knew what I was talking about, compared to things like Pseudo-Write or the other ones. They can't see into the past or into the future. They're just writing what you're typing currently. And with ChatGPT and Claude, they can see everything in a sense. And because I had the outline, what I learned to do is also do the beats of the novel. So what the beats are usually where you have your tension, your emotions or action or whatever. The beats kind of outline the rest of the story throughout the entire process of the novel writing. And so once I had the chapter outline, I did the beat outlines per chapter, and then I did the beats within this particular scene. And then that's how I was able to control my writing style with AI helping me, and then kind of steering AI the way I wanted it to do. And then after that, the whole novel was written, and I came back and then redid all the plot points to make sure that it could capture emotion. And then all the major scenes that had to do with anything like action, because most of my writing style has to do with me writing action scenes and battle scenes. That's my strong point. So I had to make sure that the AI captured my style of writing when it came to people fighting. But for this particular one, I didn't write based on the campaign. I write a story that was fresh and new after the campaign happened. And so my original process that I explained in the beginning when I wrote my other campaigns is because I already had the notes for my stories. This one, I didn't have any notes at all. So it was just a brand new start. But I built it off of what Mr. GM Philosopher here had already given us, that information. And all I did is expand, kind of like from the building a one sentence that he gave me, then I just kind of grew it from there. And he gave me some information as well. And then it's just like a snowflake. I just kind of started growing, which there's a template on how to write like a snow. I think it's called the snowflake style, or I forgot what it's called, but you just have one sentence, then you make a paragraph, and then you make multiple paragraphs, and then you make a chapter from there. You start growing it. Hopefully that's kind of understandable, especially because this process that I'm using is completely new to me. I think it did better than most of the other AI books that I read out there, because people were experimenting as well, and they put a disclaimer that it was AI written. Actually, yeah. So was how did I integrate my existing world of Solaire, where Valancy is from, into the world created by another person? Really, it was quite easy, just because it's just Valancy. So in the novel, I have just her flashback memories of when she was back home in Solaire, in the continent of Elandra, in the Elendrian forest of the elves. And it wasn't too hard because I wasn't concentrating too much into Solaire. I was more focused on Regenesis, but I still wanted to link them back, because in my mind, I see her returning, because she's currently, in present time, she's 250 years in the present time, compared to 250 years into the past, where this story is taking place. So she is back on Solaire on that. So yeah, really integrating her wasn't too bad, just because it was just through flashbacks and such. Now, if I had to integrate actual history into the world, that might have taken a little bit longer, and maybe a few more chapters of writing.
So, one thing that I think comes to mind when you describe this process so actually, I'm gonna say that I'm actually kind of surprised that you how can I say this? I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. I'm surprised a little bit about how honest you are about the role AI played in your writing it, because I think a lot of people use AI maybe more than they let on. I actually
Yeah.
like these days. I really think, and you're very like super open about like your process for this, which I know is true because like you were talking to me about it the whole time, and and so it's like really interesting. And it was interesting to hear your notes on it, because I haven't used actually AI to write fiction the way you have. For me, I've mostly used AI to help me write things like marketing, copy, and things like that. But one thing that I do realize with AI, I did a trial run back in the beginning when we started playing the Bazgoth campaign with Grom. I took transcripts from the videos. And then I put them into ChatGPT, and then I said, here's what happened. We have to cut out a lot of the extra stuff. Like, we have to cut out all the kind of role play stuff. We want to try to condense it down. And then what was really important to me was like, I want all the dialogue to be 100% accurate, because I want what people actually said to be true. I don't want you to like, change that. And it was so difficult for me to try to get AI to do that. It like wanted to change the dialogue and scenes a lot, it seemed like. So that was an interesting roadblock I ran into. And what ended up happening was, and I only wrote like one chapter, and then I put that on pause. Like I didn't have time to continue that project. But like what ended up happening was it kind of went through it, but then I had to like literally go through the video, and then line by line I had to make sure the dialogue was all right, because to me, like that was an important factor. But when you're writing something new, I wanted to ask you if you ran into those issues, like where sometimes it seemed like AI is so incredible in some ways, but then in some ways it almost makes like dumb mistakes, like
Yeah.
like I told you not to do that, but you exactly did what I told you not to do, kind of thing. Like it does that sometimes. Do you have any? Did you encounter any of that?
Yeah. It's like I was fighting with AI sometimes. It's like, what's wrong with you? Are you stupid? So wait a minute. I'm the one that's stupid because I'm talking to a machine. No. I didn't have it quite a lot with the novel. I've had it because, like I said, I was really big against AI. I fought it all the time, but at the same time, I know it's a wave that it's not going to be stopped. I'm not a complete Luddite, I guess, Ludonian, whatever they call them. But I have to learn to embrace change, and for most novel writers out there, it's you don't embrace them, you're going to be. A lot of them are thinking that you're going to be left behind. But there is quite a big belief that, like I said, going back to the one push of the button and it can write the story, and it's like, no, if you do that and then you publish this out there, people are going to know right away. There are patterns of AI that you can pick up on really quick, and I think there's a lot still spread out through this book where the descriptions, I had to keep going back and say, no, go back to my style of writing. And the one that I've noticed is a pattern of threes. And I have to keep like yelling at it. It's like, no, don't use this pattern. It's like, go back to the natural style. And I have to teach it. And it took me actually about 4 or 5 days of putting all 7 of my novels so it can take scenes and particular parts of my novels so it could learn to adjust to the way I like to my mood and tone. And this particular one with dialogue, I'll tell you, it did actually pretty good than I suspected. And the way that I did it though is I already knew the personalities of the characters. Faylene, it did really good at capturing Faylene because she gave backstory, and then she gave backstory of her world, and then with you giving me backstory of Luna and capturing her personality, I created a whole biography of the characters. So we usually create these biographies for ourselves, but with AI, it actually works really well. And with Kerrigan, I also captured that, and it's interesting because in the dialogue, once you get to read the story, you can see the tension in the very few chapters between Kerrigan and Luna. And Kerrigan still doesn't trust Luna, and there's dialogue there. But I also have to show when there's no dialogue how to capture that reading in between the lines. So certain things are not on the nose. That's another thing that I always had to go back and fix and tell them, no, this is too on the nose. And, myself as a writer, sometimes I do that, and I had to also go back and tweak my novel. This novel, aside from the writing process, my very first novel that I have of like Raven, that particular novel, I think I spent like 5,000-6,000 on edits, and because there's this, you have to go through the the line copy, then you have to go to the editor that works on story structure, then you have to go through the editor that deals with consistency and stuff. Now you can find one editor that does that, but the more eyes you have on your novel, the more it's going to be, I guess, tweaked out to where it's a little bit more perfect to your liking compared to only having one editor. One editor is never going to be able to capture all the typos or all the inconsistencies or all the story structure that might have plot holes. And in fact, I think I'm very hard on myself. I think that there still might be plot holes, but it might be just me in my mind. But I'm still working on the last 4 chapters that I'm fixing on Dosan, so we can have it ready by the 15th. And with AI, it is. Oh yeah, how to establish a writing style? Really is just by starting writing right away. It's don't even think about your writing style. I would say, just write. Because if you start thinking about your writing style, you don't even know it. It's a process that grows. I forgot what the term is, but it comes into being once you start writing. I didn't know that I was more of an action writer when I started writing, but my style also deals with deep monologue, people thinking in their heads a lot. And then my strengths are usually in my fighting, how I describe fight scenes and stuff. And then mine, some people have described it as quick and easy reads that people can read by really quick, and almost like a machine gun, how my lines are. But all that was over, close to 30 years of writing here and there. And so, yeah, I wouldn't really worry about the writing style first. I would just come up with a story and just keep to writing it. And that's the biggest step first is you're never going to become a writer unless you just start writing. You got to write the first sentence and make the first paragraph and then make the first chapter. And once you do that, you should be on a roll. And another thing I tell people is don't ever go back and tweak it. Just keep writing. It doesn't matter how many typos, how many plot holes you have, how many, doubts you have. You just keep writing the story until you go to the end. Because once you start going back and tweaking the first chapter, you're never going to finish the second chapter. You're just going to keep trying to fix the first chapter. And I had to teach myself not to do that. Otherwise, I would never get novels done. And I do have some friends. One of my writing friends, she's published some books, but we work together, and we have a completely different style of writing. She will go back and try to fix things while we're working on the story, and it just slows down this process for myself, because I'm a different type of writer. I have to just write the entire story and finish it first, and then I'll go back. Otherwise, I'll just never finish, because I'll keep just figuring out what's this mood about, what's this tone about, what's my style, is this feeling my style? I don't think this feeling my style. So yeah, just write the story first and finish it. But yeah, sorry, I kind of went off the rails on not answering that question. What was I talking about?
Oh, we were just talking about AI. Sometimes it doesn't do what you want it to do, and there's some
Yeah,
interesting
yeah.
things with that. Herminator is another question here. How do you write action scenes without going blow by blow, describing every sword swing and dodge and blood splatter? It's actually a really good question, actually.
You don't want to do that just because if you do that, it's weird, but you're gonna exhaust the reader. I do have a lot of that. I do go blow by blow on certain aspects, but only on like the most tense scenes where I really want to describe what's going on. But let's say you're fighting. It's just like D&D when you're playing the campaign. If you have like 10 monsters fighting 5 of your characters, it's going to take a long time to go through 10 monsters because each one is going to have a turn, right? It's almost the same thing when you're writing a story. You want to in D&D, we might not be able to help it, but in story we can. We can say, okay, so the group went in there. They, in the most simplistic way, I'm going to put it is, you can add more detail, but the more simplistic way that you want to aim through is like, okay, the group went in there. They did their swords. They slashed. The bloodshed was everywhere, and they cut down the enemies within like 5 minutes or a minute or whatever. And that's what you would do for that particular one because you don't want to go blow by blow. But if it's an important scene, something that's going to be, you want it to be epic, the times that you do the blow by blow is when you are slowing down and you're almost kind of doing it like they do in movies where the action seems to slow down. And like I think I have a lot where Valanci's fighting the brother in the end where it says the sword clanged against her scimitar and she felt the bone almost like break on her wrist as the force of Ugai like landed on her, and then she spun around with her heel slipping on the ice and then struck at his thigh with her dagger. And then I would go into detail doing those right there because it's getting pretty close and they're pretty beat up, almost like a Rocky boxing match.
So I would like to take a minute, William, and ask you about this book in particular. I kind of wanted to pick your brain a little bit about like maybe your favorite 2 or 3 scenes maybe that you wrote about or interesting things, and then maybe just tell us a little bit about it, a little bit about not only kind of what people might be able to expect from the book if they read it, but also from the writing perspective, like parts that you think turned out really well, and then like why you think they turned out well. Just if you have any thoughts about that, I'd be very interested to hear about that actually.
Yeah. Yeah, Herminator. Yeah, exhausted reading about stories that go too much into detail about general fight scenes. Yeah, that's what I tried to hopefully not do. I don't know if you ever read any of Drizzt Do'Urden. I kind of like used that pace for mine. I don't know if that was one of the books you've read that exhausted you or not, but if it is, I guess mine might exhaust you. No, I tried to. R.L. Salvatore's style of fight scenes for Drizzt is one of my favorites, and I kind of fell in line with that idea of writing fight scenes. And then again, also Lee Childs and the what's his name, Jack Richter, Jack Richer, I forgot his. But anyway, the series that's on Amazon too. But I like reading his books and using that momentum because my fight scenes almost follow that style of, I guess, machine gun beats when they're fighting. So yeah, you don't ever want to exhaust your readers, but some readers tend to like that and others don't. So the best way is just write your style. Write your story first. Eventually you'll figure out your style, and then just if it works and people still love your writing, there's gonna always be people that don't love your writing. Same as like I say with D&D. Some people like your DM style, some people don't. So that's the biggest thing is don't ever try to please a lot. And also, if you ever do write a book, a lot of people chase reviews. You can chase reviews, but they always try to see if you can get nothing but 5 stars. No, it's okay. I was going to look through the book. Let me see. So I do have a couple of scenes that I like. I know in the book, without giving too much away, is when Kerrigan and Valanthi finally get together. That's there's more detail on those because, of course, we usually go to fade to black in the DM when you're DMing or when we're doing the live stream. With this one, there's some hot spicy stuff there. It doesn't get too spicy, but there's some scenes where descriptions, and they finally get together, and that was one of my favorites because I tried to push that all the way and build up the idea behind that, I guess, interest that they had for each other. My other favorite one has to be when Valanthi finally takes on Kerrigan's brother, because he just seems like an unstoppable force. And then there's where everybody's kind of working together. You got Faylene doing her. So Faylene was interesting. Was her because I know her character, the way she created it, not very intelligent, but very wise. So I was trying to figure out how I'm going to incorporate that, which probably was one of my harder aspects of trying to do her character. But the best way I could do it is that she actually got visions and dialogue in a sense through these visions from the grove that they were currently on. And that's how she was able to help while she was in the grove with her one hand doing the spell work that needed to be done to control the rift, while Luna, I gave more presence. And one of my favorite ones with Luna is when she finally learned that I think that she learned that she didn't have to follow I don't know if I pronounced your god's name right. Earlis. Oh, I don't know if I can hear you. You might be muted.
Oh, I am muted. Yeah, no, that's right. Yep, that's exactly right.
Okay, yeah. So she finally found out that she has an actual. The way I created it, which I showed Mr. Philosopher here, I created an actual species on D&D Beyond for Luna. So she actually takes on a form that is her actual, like, kind of a horned beast creature, since it was convergence that created her. And then I also created a second form that is her true form, depending on how she feels that she portrays herself, which became a female form of Luna. And once she embraced her horned form, she became pretty strong, and she was a big help with the group. And let's see, Kerrigan finally decided that okay, I'm going to accept her. Trying to think of, I think those are my most favorite scenes without giving away too much from the book.
Gotcha. Here, there's a really good question from Waz if you wanted to comment.
Intention of writing Valanthi's adventures? No, I did not actually. I went into the Barren Lands with the intention of actually just being a player, because I love being a player. And hopefully when I started playing with everybody was such a good role player that I knew that I wanted to bring a character from Solaire. Now that was true. And Valanthi is, as I mentioned, is currently the queen 250 years after this story in my actual world. And she's one of the most, she's actually the queen of the continent of Elandria, though maybe maybe the North people might not agree with that. But in her lore, she did a lot of fighting to get her throne, and she didn't even know she was a queen. And currently that's what is happening right now in the Barren Lands. She doesn't even know that she's a queen. The only outside contact she had after she disappeared into the forest was the monk that used to visit her. So when I learned, the Tuesday campaign really fit in with my fun that I wanted to do, and the only notes I started taking were just about 20 pages of how I should act her out. And because if I guess when I published my archetype videos, I would have been the storyteller and the actor archetype. and so I really got into her character, and I had to, like, for one instance there, if she needed to connect with the group, she would have probably just left because I was being true to her character, and I didn't want her to go off something else. Yeah, Tarnik, she's not my queen for sure. I guess if they ever meet her, yeah. So yeah, I didn't have an intention of creating a story. I actually had an intention of writing an NPC story before Valanthi took shape and this campaign took shape, because I have ideas for all the campaigns that I'm currently running, including the one that Tarnik is on. Grom, Tarnik, Grumthar, and all them. And my other 2 current campaigns, plus the other 2 campaigns that just finished in my world. That's what I had done back in my 20s about the first stories I've written. But hopefully these ones won't get stolen. But so after playing the game, though, I got that attachment of the characters. I loved the way that Soul was played. Faylene, for sure, made an impression. Luna started to grow on me. I was like, if I was Valanthi, I guess I would see this need to protect them. Kerrigan, of course, and then Hector, kind of a thorn to Valanthi's side, but she respected him still for that intelligence. And so that idea just kind of grew from there. It's like, you know what, I'm gonna. To me, I wanted to keep playing because I enjoyed it, but I knew that everybody had schedules, so I knew we weren't going to do it. So that's when the idea popped in, and I said, you know what? Let me write a continuation. Let's see. I can write the first book, and if we ever get back together, I can get ideas to finally make the second book, which also kind of gave me some certain hesitation. I didn't know how far I should push these characters. Eventually, I pushed them to 9th level, I think, over the few months that the story takes place in the book. And because there's no way they would have been able to do all the action scenes without them being at a higher level. So hopefully that answered your question. Yeah, I kind of went into a big explanation there, but yeah.
No, very good. Very awesome. Okay, so I would like to, I'm going to drop the link. Herminator's question. Stolen. I missed the part of the stream. Did you talk about that at the beginning?
Oh yeah. When I first started writing about my world, when I was in my late teens and early 20s, I put all my backup in a floppy disk, a regular disk, and my notepad, and then I put them all in a duffel bag, and they got stolen. So I didn't write. I didn't continue on those, but now I am.
All right. I'm going to put the join in link here. We're going to do some call ins. If people want to jump in, ask questions, talk with us, hang out, ask William some more questions. I'm going to put this in here. I already pinned one comment, so this is going to be interesting. I don't know if I can pin 2, but for now, I'm just going to drop it in the chat. There's that call in link. Let me see if I can I pin 2? I can replace the pinned message. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and replace the pinned message. But if you want to get the first chapter of William's new book, the link is also in the description of the video here. So it's the first thing you'll see. It says get chapter 1 for free. So you can click on that and grab that. And now I've pinned the comment to join the stream. If anyone wants to join, chat with us, hang out. Basically here talking about not only how to turn your D&D campaign into a novel, which William has done. And this is like a continuation, but still it's a very similar concept, but also talking about the book, celebrating the book. I think it's awesome. I think personally, I mean, I have some emotional stakes in it because it was a game I was involved in. So that's really fun for me. It even involves some characters that I came up with in the game, but still it's awesome.
It takes place in your world.
Yeah, it did. And no, that's true. Actually, that's a huge thing. Hey, Terminator, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Long time no see. Pretty good. Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Do you have any questions or comments, or are you just here to hang out?
Um, when I saw this meet the author and talk to the author stream, I was like, this is what I've been wanting to do for years. I played in a campaign that I took notes on. I did screen capture recordings of everyone's dialogue and different things. And I was like, I want to turn this into a book someday. And then just other campaigns and things like I want to be. It's one of those things where I want to be an author, but I've never done any. I was never good in English class in high school and things, and so it was just I was like, this is perfect. I can maybe pick the brain of an author and figure out how to.
Oh,
Uh-oh. Oh, Loveless is here. Hey, Loveless. We'll have to give
Hey.
Hermander a minute to maybe come back.
oh
Here.
no! Cut off.
Oh no. But I do want to talk about this for just a minute though, because so the fact that you got the screen recordings and everything is super, super cool. And to me, that's actually one of the most challenging things. Nowadays we can record our games, which is so awesome if you want to write them later. Like having all of that recorded, even if it's lo-fi, like as long as you can hear the dialogue and you hear what's going on, it can facilitate the writing of a book. And so personally, I wish more people would. Herminator mentioned that English wasn't his best class and things like that. I think a lot of people kind of have that inner, like those inner doubts, like, oh, this isn't really something I'm good at. I'm not a writer. But I think you're only a writer because those people who say I'm not a writer, I don't know how to be a writer. The only thing separating you from beginning that process is just starting that first chapter.
Yeah.
And so, like William was saying earlier, don't worry about style too much. And I would even say, don't even worry too much about English, and don't even worry too much about typos or like saying things wrong. It's just like, just start with that story, chapter 1, because the fact that you have all that stuff recorded down, so you already, and obviously you're going to have to maybe we might have to leave some things out. One thing that I think is important to think about is what the point of view is going to be when you turn a campaign into a novel. So like, for example, am I going to write it from one character's point of view, or is it going to be an overarching point of view, like a story, or is it going to be like, I always thought it'd be fun to write a campaign. Here we go. He's back. I always thought it'd be fun to write a campaign, but then to choose like a really minor NPC who wasn't very powerful and have them tell the story. So it's like you always think about it from their perspective. So it's like these god level characters. It's like, blowing their minds, but the way they would perceive it. And then like a little bit of mystery. So I think that choosing, actually to me, when I think about that challenge, is just deciding how you want to like take your point of view is kind of a big first step, because you don't want to go like changing points of views a lot unless you have a style element that lends to that, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, my style is third person point of view. I love third person. I've written first person, but first person just limits me on certain aspects. This novel actually does not have Carrigan's brother POV, but when I first started it, I was going to have it because my fear was that people weren't going to understand what happens at the end of the book, because they end up in a grove, and hopefully I outlined it enough to where readers can understand it. And then I went one time, I put POV of I think, how do you pronounce it? Ugite. That's how you pronounce her brother's name.
Yeah, like Ugyat. That's kind of what I always say. Ugyat.
Okay, I was hoping I pronounced it right, but yeah, I put, I think, 2 spots that I put his POV, and because I was experiencing with AI, the way that I explain, I'm a storyteller, I'm not a writer. I can tell. Hopefully, I can tell good stories. My first novel did win some awards and stuff, so hopefully I can use that as for myself, to tell myself that at least I was going out there to tell a good story. writing process, I hated English. I didn't. I couldn't like do grammar. I couldn't. I didn't know punctuations. And sometimes use too many commas. I did have to teach myself what they meant eventually after I wrote a couple of books. But in the beginning, we have so much tools. We have so much technology. Claude, Claude is freaking amazing. You can use ChatGPT to help you write the story, but Claude, you can put an entire chapter in Claude. And its window can read the entire chapter. In fact, it could probably read the entire book. That's the power of Claude, and it's able to keep track of it if you put it in project files. So if you want to write a story and then go back and have AI fix your punctuation, Claude can do that. A lot of people say Grammarly is good, but when I used Claude during this experimentation, I was like amazed at what it can do. So
when I was talking about English not being my best, like it's not so much the grammar, because like the grammar you can fix, but it's the like I have too many sentences in a row that are short sentences, and it's the what makes an indie author separate from Stephen King, or the big authors where they know how to write and it just works for them, whereas Joe Schmo at home who has all these ideas but can't can't give them eloquently, like I'm struggling now. It takes me a few runs through my brain to come up with what I'm trying to say and how to say it. So that's the
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
good
You know,
bad at English.
when I started writing, I was 14 years old, and I knew I wanted to write a story. I used to draw comic books and write the stories for comic books, but they were kind of bad for stories because I just like the bang pow fighting stuff. But to write a good story, the best example I could say is when you read comic books, is because the media is told in pictures, yes, but and even movies just have dialogue. But when you're talking about like the long and short sentences, I know what you mean because, like I said, my style of writing can be like bullets of sentences, short and to the point. And then sometimes I have to not exhaust the reader's mind by making longer sentences and then shorten the sentences so it has a different kind of staggering process to it. And now, what that is important, I'm going to go back to the same idea though, as don't worry too much until you can get the entire story finished first, because doubts are our biggest worms in life that just kill our dreams of trying to do something. Those doubts are the only thing to stand between you and writing a story. Now, you may not know how to say it, but in the end outcome, as long as you have the idea of the beginning and the end of the story, all you have to do now, if you now wish to focus on how to actually say it, when I write a book, I use at least 10 different references. I'll have a Stephen King book open. I'll have an Anne Rice book open. I'll have let me see, a good one. If you want to figure out how to do like detail, see if I can, where did I put that book? I always fall back on these books, but they're really good at, I have it in my bookshelf somewhere. But they're really good at giving you ideas on how to write. Like if you want to write something that has to deal with an urban scene, it'll give you an idea. If you want to do something that has to do, if you want to write something about a mansion, and it'll describe every single part of the mansion. And I can give you a link to those books. That's when you go back and then you start the phase of making it eloquent. Once you get the story done, then you go back and, okay, I want to make it say like this. This scene I think needs more detail. I think I'm going to go ahead and figure out what I can do and figure out which book you've ever read, and then go back and look through, like it might be Stephen King. Maybe you want to have an example like Stephen King. Just go back for one of my vampire novels. there's in Salem's Lot. I read a scene in Stephen King about the vampire. Like the guy was sitting in his, I think, rocking chair or something downstairs, but upstairs he heard like the creaking of the wood, the opening of a window or something. He felt the presence, and he described it so well. I just took examples of that, and when I had finished my story, I went back and I said, you know what, I'm going to use this example for that, and then I just took some ideas from that, and then I combined it with maybe an idea from another novel, and that's how you actually do it. I mean, there's big secrets that authors won't share. It's not a how do you call it? It's not a one-time face thing, but every doubt that you have is like, I'm not eloquent or I don't know how to do my sentences, is really going to be work. It's just going back after the story and just working on that particular part.
So write the whole thing out in bullet point sentences so that the 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 meat of it is there, and then go back and polish.
Yeah, well, if you depending on how you meet that, like if you're saying like an outline, you can do that. I myself am not an outliner. I actually just start chapter 1 and start writing the entire chapter, and then go all the way until I finish the story, so I can have the actual book. Outlining, you can do that too, if that's
Well,
kind
I
of like how
guess,
you
well,
meant.
my sentence structure for, like, oh, I finished the first draft, it's probably going to be chunky, basically bullet point sentences where it's like, okay, well, I'm just getting the meat of it down, and I'll figure out how to split it up and make it look better later,
Refine it.
even though I may not know, you know, I could look at the chapter and go, it's not, I don't want to publish it like this, but I don't know what to do to it. I just know that it's not going to be published like this.
um, yeah, technically, yeah. I mean, that's what I do first, is because you want to get the story done first. As long as you know where you want to end it, that's important. If you don't know where the story is going to end, then that might be a problem. The beginning and the end, the two most important ones. The middle part is the desert. There's where people usually lose readers, so that is also important. But you still have to have your beginning and end. The middle part is the one that you are going to be tested as a writer, because you have to keep people's interest and figure out how you're going to do it. So once you have those 3 parts of the story done, the 3-act structure, then you go back and polish it. Yeah, you pretty much just said it. Yeah, you want to go in there and polish it, because it's still work, it's still a phase, and that's why I usually tell new writers, is just, you just got to write the story. You just got to go in there, and all those doubts, eventually you'll figure it out. I didn't know how to do it. I knew that I didn't want to publish my first story when I wrote my first novel. I didn't get, unfortunately, didn't get looked at because it got stolen, but it was going to be probably 3 books, maybe 2, but it was a 500,000 word story. And I tell you, I didn't know anything about what it consisted of to be able to go back and fix it. I just knew that I was looking at like Stephen King, and I was looking at all these, and really the only thing that separates you is a diamond in the sand. Stephen King and all them, for most of these writers, Stephen King came out back in, like, I think it was the 70s. I forgot when his first book was published. The paradigm shift happened around like 2005, but during that time, the big 5 publishers actually helped you. If they liked your story, they actually helped you. They told you where to go to have interviews, and they actually did the marketing themselves, and then they actually designed book covers and everything. Nowadays, it's a big difference trying to be an author compared to who I was in those years. Nowadays, you have to have 1974. you have to have a big following, and they want you to work for it. Even the big fives want you to sometimes have a following. So it's much harder to get your book, I think, nowadays into the hands of the big five. Indie publishers, I have seen a lot of indie publishers. I think, what was it, Wool? He was an indie publisher, and he became pretty big. And then one of the big fives picked him up. And then I forgot the other girl. She wrote a pretty famous series, young adult. But there are, I think, about 1 million or so books, maybe up to 2 million nowadays, that are published every year. And it's the same thing as when you're battling to do a script for a movie. You got millions that you have a Grand Canyon full of them. And I'm not saying that it's a way to just dissuade you from writing, but my analogy is saying, like, it's a diamond in the sand, is that you can have a diamond, but it's in the sand and nobody's seeing it. So that's the only separation, is because you could actually be a really fantastic writer. You could probably be as good as Stephen King or as Anne Rice or any of the top writers out there. The problem is trying to get that in front of people. And I think that's the biggest problem for anything. Like our D&D campaigns have that, like trying to get everything in front of people because there's so much noise out there. And you have to just push and market yourself. And unfortunately for me, I haven't been able to push my books because I've been trying to be a survivor and marketing our photography and our normal business. So that just comes down to time. But I guess that's the best way I could answer you, is like, that's what would separate us from the top authors and indie publishers. Now, don't get me wrong. There's some indie publishers out there that don't do their work and probably just write the story, and they're so excited that they just put it out there. And I don't know if you caught my my process for my first book, which I spent $5,000 or so on it in order to do all the phases. So I had to get me a line editor, a structure editor, and all the editing, and then a proofreader and all that. So that's probably my best book that I have, which I have that in the hard copy. But it went through a whole bunch of edits to get it out there. And yeah, it's just a process. Unfortunately, I could that's what the hard part is. But yeah, it's just the process of in phases and stuff like that.
Okay. And I had said in the questions in the chat log before about there's an indie author that I follow that I like the story that he has put out in different book series, but on his Facebook page, he talks about being into guns and learning martial arts and things. I'm like, okay, so when your main character is in a dungeon room and there's this horde of skeletons coming at you, I don't I don't need you to describe to me every block and every sword punch that you make. And then you make a comment in the story of, well, after a few minutes, the boss's health was only dropped to 90%. I'm like, and you're starting to lose me. Like, how do you? It's and I know that it's the lit RPG fantasy stuff where it's the main character is leveling up, and it's basically D&D plus novel equals the story. But it's always bugged me that of that particular author, it's like there are times where your blow by blow makes sense, but maybe it's because I'm not a martial artist swordsman and I don't know what you're doing of the shoulder block and then this and then this and then this. And
Yeah.
it's like you're it's you're spending more time describing it than it would have taken to watch it happen. And
And I'm
I
wondering too,
just
because
I want to write stories like that, but then not do the super detailed fight scenes.
yeah, the
Stuff
super
like that.
detailed fight scenes. And there's Yeah, that will fall into style of writing. Like I said, I don't know if you ever read R.L. Salvatore, but my style, I love the way that he writes, and the way he can describe of certain processes of, I guess, of going into the details when he's fighting a main guy. And it's just like I said too. It's like you don't want to do that for every scene, otherwise it's just going to tire you out. And I think I got one, two, I think either 3 or 4 main fight scenes in mine, and everything else was more like RP. It's like a D&D campaign, RP campaign. So I do have more details than that, but like for, let's say, my Raven novels, I have a lot of fight scenes, and a lot of them I have to just pass by. I can't go into details, otherwise it's gonna take all that expectation away from my main fight scenes. And if you already did your best details for your fights,
Maybe that's what it is, that he describes everything, so then the main fight scene is like, oh, well, this is just another fight scene he's
yeah,
describing.
exactly. Yeah, you don't want to do that. So you have to know which ones are going to be your value hitters and which ones are not. So if you have scenes that are going to be fight scenes, but they're not your value and emotional hitters, you don't want to do every single detail on those. You want to just like, okay, so they're going to fight. They do, like maybe a couple of like quick slashes here and there, and the group slashed through the trolls as fast as they could. Some of them were re-healing again, but they ran out of there. You want to do something like that. But if it's going to be a big fight scene, then you go into the details. And then he moved under and slapped him with a nice fat of the axe into his ribs, and then you describe the blood and all that stuff then. But yeah, for the most part, you want to give some breathing room for your readers. You don't want to detail every single one. And I've read some stuff from Stephen King that I was like, oh my gosh, we're describing this leaf falling from the tree for about an hour now. I just want to move to the story. And
Maybe
Rice
that's
used
the
to
other
do that.
thing, is some of this author, I tend to quote read the story better in the Audible format. And then it's like when the narrator is going in and describing these fight scenes, I'm like, okay, eventually they'll maybe get through to the end of this fight scene and get on with the story. Because then it's like, there's times where the characters that have dialogue, and it's like, this is great. Like, I'm listening to people talk back and forth. It's going to take this much time to hear that story, but I don't really, one story that I really have enjoyed of his, it's kind of like a guy from Earth gets teleported to an alien world and he can control dinosaurs. And it was neat of like how he's able to like control this dinosaur to, you know it's a triceratops, and set their horns up in one way, and the tactics of that. But every once in a while I'm like, I don't I don't need to know everything that's going on, because we're spending an hour on like 2 minutes of combat, and it just
Yeah.
draws it out.
Oh wow, he'd captured the actual truth of D&D, I guess. No, but the yeah,
Yes.
I would say some writers. I know in the beginning I did like to write a lot more detail about fight scenes, and I would almost make every single thing a fight scene. Then I learned that stories are not about fight scenes. That's not what creates the tension. I would say that if you ever want to, I guess, master the art of storytelling, is it's not usually in the details, it's in conflict. But there's a big difference between fighting and conflict in story. And like I wouldn't say every paragraph, because it kind of makes it really hard, but there has to be some sort of conflict in just about every scene that you do. It doesn't have to be like from a scale of 1 to 10. It doesn't always have to be a 10 in every scene, but there has to be some sort of level of conflict, because the stories never kind of go forward unless it's through conflict. There's been, like, who was I talking to? I forget who it was, but there was an author. We were going back and forth, and I told him I can't get into this particular scene because you're talking and having a conversation like you have in real life. And I said, well, yeah, because they're on a plane and they're flying. And so I needed to make a scene where they're talking about conversation. And I was like, well, it doesn't progress the story, and there's no conflict. They're talking about the weather and how it's great in Hawaii and how he's going to feel different when he gets to New York because it might be cooler there. But all you're doing is talking about weather, but there's no conflict in there. And every scene in Pay should contain an element of tension or struggle to drive the story forward. Right there. Yeah. And I would say if you want to become a writer, that's probably the first thing when you're writing the story is to focus on before you focus on like anything else, like the details of the sentences and all that stuff. So that was one point that I would make is study the conflict first, be it watching your good movies that actually focus on that, to reading books that deal with something that keeps you turning. Whichever book that you might read that makes you want to turn the page, study that and figure out where the conflict is, and then try to add that into your story.
Okay.
Well, that reading out should help with.
Like here, okay, so here's an idea of thinking of like Lord of the Rings, where there's a big portion of the first book of Lord of the Rings where they're traveling from Rivendell to somewhere else. Is the quote hidden conflict the knowledge that they're moving towards Mordor and trying to destroy the ring? Is that the conflict that keeps things going, or is it the little bits of like oh, we don't want to go that way because Saruman's watching, and then they're encountering bad weather, and that's the conflict. Then they have to turn around, and then they're spotted, and is
I could the style of the Lord of the Rings was very hard for me, so I never was able to read Lord of the Rings. But I watched the movies, and it's one of my favorite movies. So the best I could probably give you an example on, if like long traveling like that, if they do have elements that you as a reader feel, oh, his camera's overheating. Ooh, that's not good. I guess if there's elements in the story that you as the reader feel some sort of like there's going to be some sort of conflict or tension or some sort of worry that starts popping in your mind. I don't know why you were reading, if there was anything like that you felt coming out of the story, or if you started thinking it was just boring. If you as the reader are not feeling something like that, then there's no conflict in there. That's the best way I could say. And for some, maybe it might work. Maybe for some writers, they're masterful at doing that. Maybe he was, to where there was no conflict. I've read like Stephen King's narrations about like the boat in the It and stuff, which is interesting because there was no way to have a POV. I guess it was God watching the boat, but going through the tunnel in the sewer and stuff. And the only thing I felt of that is just mysteriousness. And I was just curious of where the boat was going. But as far as conflict, I don't think I could feel any kind of conflict except for like knowing foreshadowing or something like that. So, but you always want to default to where there's some sort of conflict. And it does, like I said, it doesn't have to be a 10 in everything. It could be a 1. You can have a conflict of one. Maybe they just have a little bit of argument. Maybe they're like, hey, we're not having breakfast. It's already second breakfast or something like that. There's like a little bit of conflict. It's like, we should stop. It's like, no, we're going to keep moving. That creates a little bit of conflict. Because in the Lord of the Rings, the hobbits want to have their second breakfast. But it's not a big conflict. It's just like a scale of one conflict, probably. But there's a little bit of conflict there. And dialogue, for sure, it's just got to be some sort of thing that sets it up from a 1 to a 10. Some sort of little bit of conflict there.
You know, when I reflect on my favorite shows and my favorite books that I've read, I think 2 of the series that I think were the best written fantasy series that I enjoyed were When Dies the Fire and then the Aragon series. It's not actually called the Aragon series, but I love those books very much.
The Inheritance Saga.
That's what it is. Yeah, the Inheritance Saga. I thought those books were just absolute page turners. Like, and I felt like
them on a shelf somewhere.
Oh heck yeah! Do you like those? Do you like them?
Yeah, I really liked the Inheritance Saga. I think there were times where there was let's see, what was it? Was it in book 3 or book 4 where they spent a really long time figuring out their true name? I'm like, how much of I guess maybe it came down to like there was a lot of word space that there was conflict, but it's like, but why does it have to be 3, 4, 5 chapters of what some people might consider fluff while other things in the story are happening?
So no, okay, so I think that one thing that I would say is, so it's like, it's probably true that we all perceive stories on a spectrum, I think. So like for you, you might say, you know, Aragon contains about 5% of what I would call fluff. I don't really care about it. It was a little boring to read, right? So, but it's like, but this other book might contain 25% fluff, right? I feel like it's probably true. We're never going to get down to 0 for every reader, right? So it's like, I guess it's a matter of like, well, what do I think is the proper amount of time to spend on this thing? And then for the people watching, like, for example, I love some shows. Like, I loved the show Sons of Anarchy, but for some reason when Mayans came out, which was like the sequel spinoff, I just couldn't get into it. And it's because it was paced differently, I think. And it just didn't have that same like page turning kind of like pacing to it that Sons of Anarchy had. But like when William's talking about conflict, one thing that I notice in the books I read and shows that I really love is like, in a way, the author makes a bet. What is the audience going to care about? So that's kind of like the bet. And then they set it up because the audience wants to see something they care about or read something they care about. And then they want to like have it turn out good, like they want it to. But then you disrupt it. And then they're like, no, stop. Like, I don't want that to happen, which is what I felt like happened all the time with Aragon. And what was the elf girl's name? I can't remember what.
Oh, gosh.
But his love interest, you know, but like they would just have these situations where they Ari. Yeah, that's right. And, you know, it was just like, all we want is for you guys to get together and be in love. That's like all anybody wants reading this. But then it was just incessantly things were getting in the way and they were having arguments, and you know then she would be, you know, annoyed at him, and then you know he would have to go off on a mission and all these different things, and so I feel like that's all I conflict. So I guess one way that I feel like I would describe conflict is it's anything that interrupts your accurate bet about what the audience wants to see and happen and that they actually care about. I think that's how I might describe it in one way.
So not necessarily an argument, but maybe some tension towards something being resolved or something changing for the characters.
Yeah, because in a way,
will they get together, and what's keeping them from getting together? Tension.
Yeah, I was gonna like in the book with Regenesis, they're traveling through to get to the villages. So that's kind of like a
Food.
It's true. He's not wrong. He
yeah,
is a
He's not
major
wrong, but
Titus, Titus,
seeking breakfast.
Titus. But so I tried to layer a couple of tension if I could, like, if anybody gets to the point where reading these first 5 chapters of the book is I had to layer because I had long travel. There was a long travel that they were doing from where they were trying to get to Draghole, which is the main place where the story is going to pop off. And so I took the idea that we had from the campaign with Luna and what you sent me as far as what Luna did and what she really was. And I added conflict when Luna would try to translate for Kerrigan. And Kerrigan would always give a steely eye look toward Luna, which Luna would be in her head like, what am I doing? Every time I try to help, she still looks at me like in a certain way. And that starts building a sense of conflict that the reader knows about. And then the reader starts asking the question, are they ever going to settle this between them? Is the team not ever going to get together because Kerrigan does not trust Luna? And Luna's over here, we build that empathy because now Luna is trying to have Kerrigan and trying to be part of the group. And she doesn't want to be alone, but she's never had that sense of belonging. So that's another conflict. So it's all layered. It's hard at first, but yeah. I don't know how these other authors might also have like little layers like that, but layering conflict or tension or whatever. Tension still comes from some sort of conflict. And when I kind of bring it to a crescendo is when Kerrigan, they just finished, or they're about to have the first battle. And Luna is trying to help bring sticks to keep the fire going. And I have Valancy and Kerrigan talking, and then there's a little bit of conflict because now another layer for my process of how I'm trying to add conflict to keep the boring parts going. Valancy is thinking about, well, Kerrigan is going to be a life that's going to be in a blink because elves are going to live forever. So that kind of puts another question in a reader's mind. It's like, how are they going to solve that part? Because if they do fall in love and become something, well, Kerrigan probably dies. It's not near, but it's in the future, but it's a question. And then Kerrigan turns over while Luna's trying to get sticks. And she says, the bloodsucker should like be further away from the group. and she tells her in Orc, which Phaelin is like, I do not understand what she say. And it's like, oh, she said that she doesn't want me near the group. And then that creates another conflict while they're traveling because Phaelin finds Luna later on sitting apart from the group. And she says, is this because she said something? Because she said for you to sit far away. And then Phaelin gets mad and walks straight to Kerrigan. And she says, Valency, you translate for me. And so that creates another conflict. So it's all boring parts that they're traveling, but I had to figure out a way to not make it so boring. And can I do that? That's what we aim for. Can I do it for every scene? I don't know. I might not. Some readers might read some parts and be like, oh man, this is boring. There's nothing happening. But I try my best. That's what we're aiming for. Can we ever achieve it 100%? Probably not, but you should at least aim for it.
here's another question about conflict or not, bringing up the Aragon inheritance saga. How do you have you ever done in books where your main character, like the power curve, like, in D&D, when we get to 20th level and we're practically gods, like how do you the end of the inheritance saga bugged me a little because it was like, oh, the main character's now all powerful, and how do I end the story with it being a good ending and them not dying some martyr death. It's like, oh, I have to make them leave so that they're out of the picture. It's like, well, so,
um, weirdly
or
enough, I
any
do.
thoughts on how you can handle a too powerful for the story character idea?
It's interesting because, particularly not with this one, I did have, like I mentioned, I did have to level them up to level 9 in the story, and over the few months this story takes place. Otherwise, they couldn't do what they needed to do against the enemies they have. The final scene, well, I don't want to say that one, but there's a final scene, but I will say that Valancy and Uge got to the point where they both fall. I kind of was picturing Rocky Balboa in that fight scene, and he was pretty powerful, but I wanted to make sure Valancy also was known to be able to handle herself with swords. I was basing that off on the new 2024 rules, of course, where she could probably do 4 attacks right now. And the best example I could probably give is my other novels where I have Raven. Raven is extremely intelligent, but is I guess, suppressed by her vampire. I guess curse that I call it. So she doesn't use the full intelligence, but she is a powerful vampire, and I have to figure out, okay, she can do most things that other vampires can't. And I love writing powerful characters, but I also know that I have to also figure out a calibration there. And by the end of the first 3 books in the series, which it's taken me a while, I'm actually finishing the 3rd book finally in the series. She is going to be just about as powerful as probably what you would call Dracula. I do have like Dracula, the Tepes family line in my world. So she's going to be pretty powerful. Then above that, in my world, you have Lilins. So you have vampires, you have Lilins, and you have the Nosferatu. 3 different races. And all of them are pretty freaking powerful vampires, but the Lilins are the most powerful. And so I kept her at a level that she still has to struggle to fight Lilins, because I needed that to have some sort of fear that she could die and lose. So that's the best way, is that I could keep it at, will she eventually become pretty powerful? Yeah, but it's going to have to be way down the line. So I know she's going to become powerful, but I have to do it in a way. And eventually when she reaches that level, I got to do it in a way that that work ends up being a good reward for the readers. I can't just end the book where she's all powerful without having some sort of backing behind it to make sense. There has to be something like we do in real life, is like maybe eventually we become really good at some sort of martial arts or something like that. But like if it was like a fantasy book, we become all powerful, but we have to have a value behind that. We can't just make them powerful. And you can't do it in just one book either, I think, in my opinion. I don't know, other writers might be better at that than me, but you can't do it in one book. I would say there has to be a value to where they're going to be all that powerful. So I don't
Or
know if that
have
answers your
something,
question, but
or have something hidden in the background of, like, they're the to not to make it that there's always a next bad guy to fight that's more powerful, but something like that where, well, now they've transcended that world's level of mortality, and now they're fighting, the god level entities across the
oh yeah.
multiverse or something.
Well, what I did do for a Raven, because they're going to get pretty freaking powerful, I did make it to where it's based off of kind of religious stuff too, and I have levels of angels and demons. The seraphim So it's only one vampire that I have in my world that has the Seraphim level power, and none of them are going to surpass that. Even Raven might be able to equal it, but never going to surpass it to where they're past Seraphim level powers, because then you're going into godhood or something like that, and they're never going to be able to match God in my world, at least is how I see it. So they're still stuck to a certain spot in that aspect. So yeah, that would probably be the only rule that I have, is they would never do that. Otherwise, it just, I don't know. I don't even know as an author if I could go into that level of story where it involves godlike powers of our idea of God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully that answered the questions and stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely
Hey, guys.
given me some things to think about.
Hey guys, sorry,
So-
my my camera keeps turning off. It's just because I think these long live streams are a little hard on it. It's getting a little old. It's probably time to get a new one. But we've come up on about an hour and a half, and I think we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank you. Let's see if I can get myself back up here. There we go. I'm back. Want to thank you, William, so much for doing this. Now, William, I don't know if you want me to do this. We can wait. Would it be okay for me to share your Amazon link with the chat for your, for your author page so they could see your books, or do you want to chill on that for a minute? I know that
just because I know I have this book.
Yeah, okay. You want to chill on it? Wait till the 15th.
Yeah, because I accidentally made it live when I wasn't supposed to. So, and it's still in the last phase of draft. I don't know if anybody was going to go in there and actually download it to read it, but I don't want them to buy it and it's the older copy.
Gotcha.
Because if I turn it off again, it's going to take another few days, and I want to make sure I can get it out by the 15th.
All right, very fair. So with that being said, everyone just keep an eye out on the Discord, because I'm going to be posting that on the 15th with a link to it, so you can go buy it. Link in the description here, chapter 1. You can read that, check it out, see if it's your style. What I've read sounds really awesome. I'm super pumped to read the whole thing. William, thank you so much for joining us, for hanging out, for sharing with us. Dungeons and 20s is William's YouTube, and William's also on the Discord. Jump in there and message him if you want any further tips, advice about this writing business stuff. And Herminator, super great to see you again. Long time no see. Thank you for jumping in and chatting with us. And with that, we're gonna call it a live stream, and we'll be back sometime in the very near future. But everyone have a great night, and we will talk to you soon.